I've entitled this sermon, In the Right Hands. And I'll tell you a little more what I mean by that. But let me tell you something I think is in really good hands right now is our International Mission Board. It's under the leadership of Dr. Paul Chitwood. He was Phil Umbarger's pastor at one time, I believe. And this is from 2021, just the story. It says, Your Generosity Transformed Lives. In 2021, 592,408 people heard the gospel, and 176,940 of them became new believers around the world. So this is really the number one reason that I partner with the Southern Baptist Convention. We partner with the Southern Baptist Convention is because of the International Mission Board. It's really the number one sending agency, mission sending agency in the history of the world, this organization is. We have over 4,000 full-time missionaries on the field reaching almost every country in the world right now. And so just thank you for those gifts. They have a thing every year called Lottie Moon Christmas Offering, but we just budget for that because we don't want to just be dependent on a special offering on a Sunday. But just remember, like every time you give, about $1 out of $3 goes to some form of mission work, which I'll be talking about today. But I wanted to start this, just talk about a Christmas season, and we were talking about unconventional Christmas. This is a little bit of an unconventional Christmas sermon, unconventional passage, a couple of them that I'm going to be preaching from. But when we talk about sending missionaries, I think it'd be really easy for you when you make your direct deposits, you tie your bank account or however you do it. Some of you might actually still write those things called checks, okay? And we're thankful for that. But when you're doing that, I think a lot of times we see the building, or maybe you see, I know part of this goes to Pastor Steve, or the youth department, or it helps children, or maybe it builds courts or whatever out there, because those things are right here for you every week. But for me, every week, when I talk about international missions, I have faces right here for me every week, because there are people that I'm good friends with that I know very well that love Jesus so much that have gone on the field. I'm going to show you a couple of short videos of just people that I've partnered with. I've gone with IMB in a lot of nations of the world and really shared Jesus in 42 countries throughout the world, gotten to know some of these people, but a lot of them I knew before they went on the field. One of which is a guy named Andrew Ely. Andrew, I held him when he was a baby. His dad did ministry with me. We did camps. Eventually, Andrew helped start one of our campus plants back in Huntington, West Virginia. And I can remember the talk with his mom and dad right after he got married, that he and his wife, Emily, who grew up in Dee's home church, they felt called to go to full-time missions, and they are serving now in Southwest Poland. And it's hard for them over there. And there's a reason these unreached areas are called hard-to-reach areas, because if they were easy-to-reach areas, then what? We would have already reached them, right? It would be easy to share the gospel there. And so I want you to just watch this video a little bit, just to give a face to the people that we support when we give to the Southern Baptist Convention.
Hi friends, my name is Andrew Ely. I work with the International Mission Board here in Southwest Poland, specifically in the city of Katowice. And I want to give you an update on the things that you are supporting when you give to Lottie Moon, when you give to the International Mission Board, and what our work looks like here in Poland. I'm here with my wife Emily and my 2-year-old daughter Kit, and there's one other family here that we serve with. We're both part of young church plants here in town, and part of that ministry looks like preaching, it's youth ministry, it's family outreach events, and it's working with an English club downtown. That's kind of an open discourse that we get to have wonderful spiritual conversations with people in English who are willing to practice their English with us and who are willing to have good but difficult conversations together. This season we've been asking prayer for our families as we are learning to parent in a completely different context, and the other family we work with is doing the same.
Okay, and that's something that Andrew prays specifically, not only for his ministry, but he's there with his young wife of not so very many years with a 2-year-old. And when it comes to Christmas time, you want to see the kids on Mama and Papa's laps, right? And so it's difficult for them. This is a hard time of year, and as far north as they are in Poland, it's dark all the time where they are. So just please continue to keep them in your prayers. I'm going to share with you another friend of mine for close to 20 years. His name's Ronnie Davis. And he was a part of a seminary that began in Cape Town, South Africa. That's down at the southern tip of the African continent. I'm going to speak in a moment about a seminary in the middle of the African continent. And between these two seminaries that we sponsor there, they send out missionaries to every country in sub-Saharan Africa. They've got graduates there. They started out with just very few, and now they've moved to over 100 students. This is the cool part, is where they've planted churches that he's been a part of helping plant churches over there. Now those churches have grown up kids who are finishing college and wanting to get full-time ministry training. So my friend Ronnie here, now those churches we planted are actually sending out pastors to plant out more churches. Isn't that fantastic? I mean, it's going like we planned, So thank the Lord for that. Let's hear from Ronnie. And he's another guy, like if he ever loses his job as a missionary professor, he could be Santa Claus. Here we go.
How's it? Hello from Cape Town, South Africa. I'm Ronnie Davis. My wife Gail and I greet you in the wonderful name of our Lord and Savior. So excited to be able to share with you some ministry updates for the end of 2023. Hard to believe that we're already at that point. But a lot's been happening that we'd like to update you on as we thank you for your continued prayer support and financial support through the Lottie Moon Christmas offering and the cooperative program. First, let me tell you a little bit about what's happening at the seminary.
I've already told you about seminary. I'm summarizing. He goes on 10 minutes. He's long-winded like I am. So, but anyway, be praying for Ronnie and Gail over there, and at our seminary in Uganda, up in north central sub-Saharan Africa. There's a man that's a friend of mine, Anthony Shelton. He's a Princeton graduate. He's somebody that I sit down with, and I'm just remembered every time. He's smarter than I am when I'm around him. And he's a brilliant guy, and he just felt like instead of going out and making millions that he could have done, he got seminary and language training, and he and his wife and his two wee little girls back at the time made their way over to Uganda Baptist Seminary. Lord willing, I'll be over there in just a few weeks to help teach classes there. This is their most recent graduating class there in Uganda. They graduate students literally every quarter. They have a graduation like this. They have sent out over 400 pastors in the last 10 years. Just all over it with solid theological foundation. Now, part of why I go over there, and I'm like adjunct prof or whatever they call me, visiting professor, is you've got to have so many PhDs teaching at a university all over the world, but they're in Africa as well, and they have to be on the list for you to get your and keep your accreditation, okay? And so this is Anthony's wife, Misty, and our gifts through the Southern Baptist Convention helped her because she was like, man, I'm here. I could get a PhD, and that would help with teaching here at the seminary, especially in the areas of women's ministries. And so we helped, and I say we, our congregation, the Southern Baptist Convention Center, this is Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, where my daughter-in-law went. And she just, this last week, got her PhD and can teach in education over there. And so women with PhDs in Africa, we're breaking new ground over there, talking about how women can be ministers in the local church. And I'm not talking about ordained pastors, elders, I'm not getting into all that stuff. But I'm saying that they can actually lead and direct and teach women into the local churches. Now, along with that, can you imagine, you raise these wee little girls, you take them away from their grandbabies, that they go over to Africa, they raise them up, well, now they need to go to college. And so these girls could have gone anywhere they wanted to in the world. You've seen them here. They were actually here on a Sunday morning 2.5 years ago. They could choose to go anywhere that they wanted to go in the world, and guess where they chose? The great state of Tennessee. They're at Union University right now. And so our gifts through the International Mission Board help pay their tuition while their mom and dad are 3,000 miles away, 4,000 miles away over in Uganda. So that's what your gifts, when we give, that's almost $1 out of $3 goes to things such as this. And then most of all, if you are an old-time Calvary member and you've been here since the beginning, you know this young man who actually grew up here. His name's Will Jackson, okay? And Will and his family are over there serving in South Asia. Lord willing, I'm going to join him soon, but I will ask you to pray for this. There's a conference over there that I would be at before I would visit with him that has about 400,000 people that I could share the gospel with. It's coming, but the Indian government, they've approved everybody else's visa. Mine has not been approved yet. So I'm praying that you will pray about that this morning. I will get that visa back in the next couple of days. So be praying for me to be able to get into that country. But as we think about Will, this is what I say everything I've said to lead to this next part, okay? For the International Mission Board to send out a family of 4, it costs on average about $140,000 per year. And you might be thinking, oh, are they making a lot of money? Well, first of all, we're paying 2 full-time salaries for people with master's degrees, okay? Secondly, we're providing their housing for them while they're there. We provide all their medical benefits. Their travel, Will literally, he travels all over South Asia training pastors and church members in evangelism, church organization. He needs visas. Their family needs visas to go around and to be able to do this for their family, to have language study, for their children's education. You know who they are. And that's a big reason I share this, because when you look at this, a lot of times you just say, oh, Lottie Moon offering or whatever. This is someone from our congregation, and I want you to think about this. If a congregation our size can't support a full-time missionary, and we're in the top 1% of Southern Baptist churches, who is going to support them? Of all the ministries employed here, shouldn't we have one of our employees be someone who's reaching literally the most unreached country in the world? What a privilege we have to be able to send someone, one of our own sons, over to do this work of ministry. But my friends, listen, ministry is hard, but reaching hard areas is not cheap. But the cost of reaching these hard, difficult areas is worth it. Why? Because every single day, 154,937 people on this earth die without knowing who Christ is. And when they die and they don't know Christ, what are the ramifications of that for all eternity? Do you follow what I'm saying? This is a big, big deal. There are still 4,920 people groups remaining with little or no access to the gospel. So part of our goal, okay, in partnering with 140 different global Baptist entities, that we will mobilize from here in the United States by the year of 2025, 500 new full-time missionaries. But in order to fund 500 new missionaries to reach these 4,920 people groups, in order to reach them, we also have to keep supporting people like Will, right? He is our employee. So sometimes when people say to me, like, why do we give so much to missions? Like, if we aren't able to support a full-time missionary, who can? He is our employee reaching the masses on behalf of Jesus. We have another full-time missionary on campus, not the traditional missionary we would think of, but Brother Mark Witt. And when we give to the Tennessee Mission Board, we are giving to dozens of ministry in Moores of our backyard. Mark is reaching one of the largest if not the largest undergraduate population in the state of Tennessee, helping fund the BCM building so that students have a safe place to come and where they can worship there on campus. And so Part of our offerings goes to support the work he is doing, and on every campus in the state of Tennessee, we have full-time missionaries, we have camps, we have evangelistic events. These things we sponsor through the Tennessee Baptist Mission Board to reach our own backyard, but we also partner with the over 3,000 churches in the state of Tennessee so that when one of our churches or their members get struck like what happened last week up in Springfield, which is where Carol Jameson's home church, it's where her mother still attends. When that happens in their community, our mission support goes to help people in our state who need help in the immediate short term to get them on their feet and move them in that direction. Now, I've talked about international, I've talked about like state ministries, but now I'm going to go local. And when I moved here, something struck me, and I think this happened because Murfreesboro grew so quickly. There's a lot of our infrastructure, our roads be an example of that weren't ready. That's why we had traffic problems, not ready for the mass influx of the population that we've seen over the last 20 to 25 years. And upon moving here, it struck me that if a family became homeless, and that happens sometimes, dad loses his job, mom loses a job, they're not making enough money to make ends meet, they lose their apartment, or we know what rent looks like in the Murfreesboro area. When those difficult things happen, it struck me, how could a city this large not have a homeless shelter when little kids and their moms and dads get evicted from their homes or their apartments? Like, who gets them from point A to point B while they're looking and getting them on their feet so they can go find a job? We don't have something like that for very many people at all. And so there's a ministry. We partner with over 25 Mercy ministries here in the Murfreesboro area. We support them in a major way. But there's one project in particular that is addressing the situation I mentioned to you earlier about what happens if a family in our own backyard doesn't have a place to live, especially in the winter months. With little children, what are we going to do with them? And that's why we partner with this ministry of the Journey Home.
5,000 people will experience homelessness this year in Rutherford County. The Journey Home is an organization that helps people move from homelessness, housing instability, back into housing, back into services to keep that housing, and back into community life. We serve meals 7 days a week. We have clothing and hygiene services. We have health care. We have case managers that help people with life skills and to find permanent housing, both in the community as well as housing that we operate. We are really excited about the progress we're making on the relocating the Journey Homes Resource Center down the street. We've raised a significant amount of money toward that goal. We're down to less than $1 million left on that project. At the same time, we've never seen more need. And so our need to operate the services that we provide today is also really important. So now more than ever, we need our community to come together and invest around caring for others. The Journey Home, together, we can transform life.
It's a great ministry they have there. It is so needed in our city. And one thing I'm excited about is business community leaders and churches have already raised about $5 million toward this project. And they need about another 100,000 by the end of the year to get this thing going in 2024. And so there's about $1 million they still owe, but with another 100, we're like, okay, let's go. And so I'm praying that in some way, like if our gifts at the end of the year really come in like they did last year, right now Mike says they're coming in even at a better rate, I think we can make a major impact so that this project can get started, and by next winter, families will have a place to go. Now, if I can make this personal a little bit, I'm going to tell you about a family from years gone by, and this is the family that wanted to go on the mission field in 2004. You see, sometimes people ask me, they say, Steve, you know, I don't know of any other church giving 30% to do mission work. And I want to give you my personal story, which I've never shared here before. In 2004, I I felt God call me. I always felt like God sometime was going to call, but it was a specific call I felt to South Africa to do theological education over there. We had one in Cape Town, but they needed one over on the Indian Ocean, the East Coast in Durban. We had already been approved. We had gone through some of the training. We already had a house picked out that we were ready to put a contract on there in Durban. And we were ready to go. I'd already told people in the church, the senior pastor just left. I had never planned to be a senior pastor. I'd always done youth ministry at this point. And I said, when I'm done doing youth ministry, I'm going to go do full-time mission work. And because of, I never thought I was going to be a senior pastor, and this will come to a surprise to no one who goes to church here. I never took one how to administrate a church from a senior pastor position class, okay? I never took any of the senior pastor classes. So a lot of you are thinking, well, that explains a lot, okay? Like, I just figured this thing out as I go. Really, trial and error, and trials on the people. And so I was planning on going. And I'm like, man, I never want to deal with adults. They get on my nerves, like old church people, like, you know, that's how I was thinking at the time. And then this family, ready to go on the mission field, we'd already told our kids and our family members. I went out of the mailbox one day, didn't even get a phone call. And I opened it from the mission board, and I pulled out a letter and said, we regret to inform you that due to missions giving decreasing in 2003, we are going to be unable to send out any new missionaries in 2004 and 2005. Not one new missionary. They said it's all we can do just to keep the missionaries we already have on the field. And my heart and Dee's hearts were broken. And I remember I went in the house and I cried because I'd already developed all of the curriculum. I didn't know what else I was going to do with my life. And that's when I felt like God said to me, don't do everything you can to keep this from happening to somebody else. And it hit me at that time, I could not lead a church to budget for missions, to have a passion for missions, while I was just being the youth pastor. And so I just could feel it all over me. God said, I'm shutting that door so you can open it for many families for years to come. And so I went back to the church and agreed to stay there on as the senior pastor. So that's the example. I helped lead that church, and they continue to be one of the top missions-giving churches in the state of West Virginia. And I want to celebrate with you a little bit. I shared this at the church family meeting in November, but in 2019, when I came, and part of me looking at the budget was, we spent really, it was $36,000 about of our $800,000 budget here at the church. We spent that on missions. And I said, man, I don't know what we got to arrange, but before I come, we got to agree to this, that if we expect our people to tithe, we have to give at least 10%. I'm willing to personally come for less money if that's what I need to do, but we have to give at least 10% of our income to missions. And so I got no pushback from the leadership at all, okay? And so in 2020, we went ahead and budgeted approximately 10% of that $800,000 budget we had that year toward missions. And the Lord blessed us right away. And really from 20 to the end of 21, we just saw some explosive growth to where in 2021, we were able to give around $450,000, close to $500,000 to mission work. We went from 10% up to 20% of our giving. And then I prayed, I said, Lord, can you just, if you keep blessing us this way, we'll just keep increasing it, just like we have before. And so we increased it up to like 25%, and this year it's 30. In 2022, we gave around $650,000 to missions. And in 2023, if giving keeps going like it is, or we get some bigger gifts, we're going to give about $850,000 to missions. This is what I want you to catch, which is more than what our entire church budget was just 4 years ago. So why does that happen? you look at something like that, you're like, wow, how do these things come to be? Like, it defies logic. It doesn't. Why? Because this is what God said to his people of Israel, and those principles still apply today. This is what he says. If you're generous, if you give to his work, if you give to the temple, if you give your tithes, he says, all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you if you obey the voice of the Lord your God. Blessed you shall be in the city, and blessed you shall be in the field. It's like city and the country. Blessed shall be the fruit of your womb, and the fruit of your ground, and the fruit of your cattle, and the increase of your herds, and the young of your flock. What's it saying? I'll bless your family. I'll bless your home. I'll bless your business if you just obey me. Blessed you shall be when you come in, and blessed you shall be when you go out. The Lord will cause your enemies who rise against you to be defeated before you. They shall come out against you one way and flee before you in 7 ways. The Lord will command the blessing on you and in your barns and in all that you undertake, and he will bless you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. And the Lord will make you abound in prosperity, in the fruit of your womb, in the fruit of your livestock, and in the fruit of your ground, within the land that the Lord swore to your fathers to give you. The Lord will open to you his good treasury. Now, I want you to think about that. When it says that God will open his treasury, how big is the Lord's treasury? The Bible says the earth is the Lord's and what? Everything in it. So in other words, he can give us everything if we just bless him. He will bless us if we're willing to bless others. If we will love others like our love ourselves, he will continue to bless us. But not only that, not only does he have the whole world's treasury, he will bless us in the heavens. What does that mean? Listen, his spiritual blessings are far greater than the material blessings of this world. That's what I have to communicate to you, is like God wants to pour out his blessings on you, our church, our city, our state, our nation, our world. But what it's going to take is the people of God being obedient to his giving pattern around the world. And this is why, like, I'm not patting myself on the back, because honestly, it's not enough. In 2004, Dee and I said, listen, if we're going to lead the church to give someday 20%, we got to start doing that. To the point that now we're giving 20 to 30% of our income to the work of the Lord through his church and through other agencies. And again, I'm not saying that here because as Americans, man, we've been blessed like no nation in the history of the world. So let's not think, man, I just want to give God 10%, like it all belongs to God. Lord, what do I need to live on in the community I'm living in, okay? And then what can I do to bless people around the world to do your work? And then God says, I will give you the rain to your land in its season and to bless all the work of your hands. And my friends, I could tell story after story after story. I remember like when my son got a really, really good score on his college entrance exams, to where he was qualifying to go, and all the Ivy League schools were recruiting him. And I just remember thinking, I can't pay it. I got no way to send him to Harvard or to Columbia or to Yale. Like, I can't, it was $70,000 a year. And I said, Lord, I just got to trust you. And we just decided to give more. And then he got a letter in the mail that said not only they were going to cover all that $70,000 a year, they were going to buy him plane tickets to come home on the holidays. Like, God will pour out his blessings on you if you pour out your blessings on others. And so when I talk about the material things, I want to take the next 15 to 20 minutes to talk about addressing really the biggest problem in the world around us. And that's addressing the lostness here in Rutherford County. We talk about the world, we talk about the state, we talk about our own backyard. And then early on in ministry, like when I saw our church growing, when we hit the 500 mark, and I was like, ooh, this is a big deal, we're at 500. I remember in 2010, at my last church, I saw the census numbers, and it said approximately 250,000 people lived within a 20-mile radius of the tri-state area, and our church was right in the center of that. So there were about 250,000 people within a 20-mile radius of our church. But then I saw another statistic come out right after that that said on any given Sunday morning, not how many people checked the census box saying that they were a Christian, not how many people were on the membership rolls in churches in the tri-state area, but what was the average church attendance worship numbers on any given Sunday morning. And in that entire area, it was about 38,000 people. And when I look further in the numbers, less than 1 out of 8 people under the age of 18 were in church on any given Sunday. And then it hit me. Like, my goal was with the church, you know, we set together, we want to grow it to be 1,000 people, from 500 to 1,000. And it's like God slapped me in the face, said, Steve, even if this church grows by 500 people in the next 5 years, you won't even move the needle addressing the lostness in the tri-state area by 1%. This job's too big for you. It's too big for one church. And so when Mark called me down here, in our first conversation, he shared with me these statistics. And they were speculating on the 2020. He said, but these are coming in. And if you've grown up here, you know, like we've had exponential growth here. We've gone from about 183,000 people in the year 2000 to, in 2020, over 340,000, expecting it to be over 400,000 within the next 2 years. But here it is. If you look at the statistics of how many people were in church on any given Sunday in Rutherford County in the year 2000, it was 64. And while we have seen growth in the numbers in 2020, it is not even close to commensurate with the growth that we've seen in our county. Do you get that? So in other words, the needle in Rutherford County is moving the other way. And so even like World Outreach grows, even in New Vision grows, even though Experience has grown, we're not moving the needle. Like 2 or 3 churches can't move it. We need all the churches in the area. The one church in Murfreesboro pulling on the rope in the same direction. Alan Jackson can't do it by himself. And so if we're going to address lostness in our community, man, we got to take our cues from how Jesus did it. If you turn to Matthew chapter 4, this is right after Jesus has called Peter and James and John and Andrew and some other disciples. And so he takes them with him, visiting about 240 cities in the Galilee region, okay? And a lot of times you see, like on The Chosen, God bless them, they're actually doing CGI, trying to be more realistic about it now. But actually, if you look at the population of that area, it was somewhere between 3 to 4 million people in what we would call back then the geographic region of Israel, what some would call Rome, called Palestine. So Jesus goes through these 240 cities, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction among all the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains. So I got a little poll question to ask you here this morning. How many of you, if you knew Jesus were here today, and all he had to do was touch you to be healed, how many of you have some kind of ache or pain Jesus could help you with today? Raise your hand if you got that going on. Everybody over 50 just raised their hand, and about half the rest of you. Like, we could all use it. Can you imagine if word got out in Middle Tennessee that there was a guy in Murfreesboro, all he's got to touch you and your neck pain goes away? That's what's happening. People that are oppressed by demons, having seizures, paralytics, and he's healing them all. And the multitudes, that's what I mean, millions of people are following, like just mass crowds from Galilee and the Decapolis, that's 10 Greek cities up in that region. From Jerusalem, that's in Judea, that's down in the south. And from beyond the Jordan, that means out past in the east, the Jordan River in the east. What it's saying is Jesus was traveling to these 240 cities in this big area. And then after those 6 months, he's got about 1.5 years of his life yet. He's got his disciples with him, and he's hitting all those cities and villages, teaching, proclaiming the gospel, still healing every disease and affliction. And there's 1 million people trying to get a piece of him. And the Bible says this, and I really believe it's something that Jesus had never experienced before, an emotion Jesus had never felt. It says, when he saw the multitudes, literally, like there's 1 million people wanting to get in to see him, he had compassion for them. Now, what does that mean? The prefix with passion, it means suffering. With suffering. It literally is the Greek term. It says he was sick to his stomach. I got to ask you a question. When's the last time that some injustice issue that wasn't your issue, didn't affect you and your family, some injustice that you saw made you sick to your stomach? I don't know how often you have those, but Jesus experienced it here. And it's not just, watch this, it's not just because he saw sin and hurt and disease in the world. He'd seen that since humanity was created. But this is what changed. He saw all these millions, and he was sick to his stomach because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Like sheep, this word for shepherd is like the word for pastor. He's looking at these million people, and for the first time since the beginning of creation and his pre-existence before that, because he became a baby in the manger, he dropped one aspect of his humanity, or one aspect of his deity, in order to experience humanity, in that he was no longer omnipresent. Do you get that? He could no longer be everywhere at the same time. And so he's seeing all these people out there, and he's like, I can't reach them all. I can't touch them all. 240 cities around here, like he's got the whole world that he's thinking about, right? But just in that reason, one Jesus for 240 synagogues, he can't make it happen. I can't be everywhere at once. So he says to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful. Look at all these people, but the laborers are few. I need more pastors. I need more missionaries. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Now, that's the end of chapter 9, but if you read the Greek version, okay, the original version that Matthew would have written, it didn't start a new chapter. It just rolls into the next paragraph. Right after he says, I need you guys to pray about God sending more people out. They were like, okay, Jesus, we'll do that. And then in the very next verse, he calls them to him, and he gives them authorities to cast them out and to heal every disease. He sends them out. In other words, he says, you know, guys, what I just asked you to pray for? Yeah, well, you're the answer to your own prayers. Get out. Go. And so the Bible said when they describe how they went around, like they divided up. And I don't know if it was exactly like this, but general, he gave 6 missionary teams, 12 disciples. They went in pairs. And so some of them went to this region, and some here, and some here, and some here, and some here, and some here. So now you've got 2 pastors, do the math, for every, how many? 40 synagogues. For every 40 cities. Now, let me ask you a question. Can 2 pastors pastor 40 cities? The answer to that's what? No, people are still going to be harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. They can't do it. And so Jesus sends them out with this understanding that you guys got to recruit more missionaries, more pastors, more evangelists. And so they come back. Each of the disciples on average had 6. Which gives Jesus 72, and he sends them about, and he says the same thing, like go and share the gospel, okay? And now if you break it down, now it's starting to become a little more manageable here on the map. Do you see that? But it's still only 1 pastor for like every 6 cities. And can 1 pastor oversee 6 congregations and give contact to them all? The answer to that's what? No. This is why we start other campuses. This is why we got to involve more pastors, more churches, pull on the rope, same direction to move that needle addressing the lostness in our city. Now, I got one other thing to share with you in closing. And when I say in closing, don't get your hopes up. I don't mean 2 minutes. This is a 7 or 8 minute closing, okay? But I got a little quiz for you. There are 2 miracles, only 2, that are listed in all 4 Gospels. Okay? Now, I'm going to tell you the first of which. I'm going to give you a big hint. One of the miracles is the most important one. And if that miracle isn't in the Gospels, then it's not a gospel. There is no gospel without that miracle. Do you know what it is? If you're still not sure, let me give you another hint. It's called the resurrection of Jesus Christ, okay? It's in all four. Pretty important day. But there's one other miracle that all gospel writers said, man, this one was so important to our development as followers of Christ, it's got to be in all four. Do you know which one it is? It's not the virgin birth. The Christmas story isn't even all of them. Here's your hint. The feeding of the 5,000. That's right. So let's look at this story. This is after he sent out the 72. Jesus has got about a year left on this planet. And he's given his disciples an object lesson. It says when he went ashore, he saw a great crowd and he had compassion. There it is. Here's another crowd. He's still sick to his stomach. There's not enough pastors to go around. We got to train more. I got a year left to train up these guys. Now, when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, this is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away to go into the villages and buy foods for themselves. But Jesus said, they do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. And at this point, the disciples looked at him and said, do you understand? It would cost $40,000 to feed all these people a meal. We ain't got, Judas, do we got that kind of money? No, we ain't got that kind of money. And so they said to him, man, we've only got one little boy's lunch. We've only got 5 loaves here and 2 fish. And this is the thought I want to leave with you today, that the disciples didn't quite understand. I got some things here. Don't roll away. I got here a golf ball, okay? Now, a few years ago, I was a decent golfer, and me and my buddies would travel around and play at charity events and win all their money and their prizes. Dee was supportive of me being gone on Sunday because, it usually meant we were going to get to go out to a really nice place to eat. But now, if you put this golf ball in my hand, it just costs me money. I'm terrible. We pay an entry fee, and it's gone. I'm lucky to break 90 anymore. So you put this golf ball in Steve Willis's hand, it's negative money. But you put this golf ball in Rory McIlroy's hands or Tiger Woods, and it's worth millions. Some of you don't know this. I don't think I've ever shared this here before. I was a tennis player in high school. Pretty decent. Got a college scholarship for it. And I remember they told me how much money I would get if I played. One school even offered me a scholarship to play basketball and tennis. Going to give me half of each. I wasn't good enough to get a full one, but you play this and this, we'll get your tuition covered. But between that and paying room and board and books and all that stuff, it was still going to lose me money. So what I'm saying is, you put a tennis ball in my hand, it was worth about $18,000. But you put that in Djokovic's hands, and it's worth $100 million. You put a basketball in my hands today, it's worth back pain. I just can't do it anymore. But you put it in LeBron James's hand, it's worth $250 million. I was a baseball player. Not very good. I was okay, nothing compared to my dad. But you put a baseball in my hand today, it's still worth about $3,000. You know why? Because I can coach kids. But that's all they'll pay me when you average out what a coach gets paid. This is worth about $5 an hour to me. That's what it's worth. But you put one of these in this guy's hands. Did you hear about this week? Shohei Ohtani, the Dodgers gave him a $700 million contract. $3,000 in my hands, $700 million in his. Are you getting the concept? It's not about what's in the hands. It's about whose hands is it in. You can put a staff like this in my hands. I can't do anything with it. You put it in Moses' hands, it parts the Red Sea. You put a slingshot and 5 rocks in David's hands, it can slay a giant. And what the disciples had to learn that day, and it had to be in all of the Gospels, is that if you just put what little bit you have in Jesus' hands, it'll be in the right hands. Do you see that? And he can reach the world with it if everybody just does the part. So this is what Jesus says, like, I have given you the keys to the kingdom. Like, I've given you the ability to drive this car to reach the world. I've given you the ability to move the needle. You can do this. I've given you what you need. Now, with my Spirit behind you, go do it. But there's one thing that Jesus could never put in our hands, because if any of it had these things in our hands, it wouldn't do anybody any good. What's that? It's these nails. Because from the day God sent his son to the manger, he was destined to put these things in the right hands. And it's because these were put in the right hands after God, the giver of all good things, had placed his child into the hands of Joseph and Mary, that we have the hope of salvation today, and that we have the filling of the Holy Spirit to now do what God has placed in our hands, which is to reach Rutherford County in the name of Jesus. Why? Not just for those who are lost, but so that Jesus Christ can receive the worship and glory he does deserve every day. Amen.